Hello and welcome back to Sound and Soul of the South. Charles Davis here, Susie Cowan over there with her Creek Fest poster up there behind her. Shout out to Creek Fest, shout out to everybody who's affiliated with that on there. So shouts out to that. How are you doing, Susie?
Just out here living the dream.
That's all you can do. That's all we can do, Susie. We're here for another road trip. We've done some traveling here the past couple of weeks, but now we're going back to the city of Augusta to talk about some different things. We're going to pick up on a couple things, but this time we're going to be talking about what the great changes have been happening around Augusta, especially downtown Augusta with that music scene. And so we're going to be talking today to a man who knows a lot about downtown Augusta because he has been a piece of it and has a lot of great stories. Coco Rubio will be our guest today, not our ghost today, our guest today. And yes, it should be a very good conversation about what's happening now in Augusta.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to learn more about the music scene and the development of downtown and where they're headed.
Yeah, and it should be looking like it's in a great place with all the things they've got going on. So without further ado, let's get into that conversation. Welcome back to Sound and Soul of the South. Charles Davis, Susie Cowan here with you. And we are now joined by a man who has been proclaimed, not self-proclaimed. Other people have given him the title of Mayor of Downtown Augusta, and I believe it's possibly true. Coco Rubio is with us today. What's going on, boss man? How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. Thank you for being here and being here for this conversation that we're going to have about Augusta and some of the history and some of the other things that are going on. So, Susie, why don't you jump us off?
I am so excited to learn more about Augusta. And they said that you're the person that knows. So we're here to learn all the things we can about Augusta and what we can experience when we come there.
Yeah, I've been around for a while, I guess. I'm an Army brat. And so my dad retired here at Fort Gordon back in 1984. And I went to Evans High School, which is in Columbia County, the suburbs of Augusta. And I graduated in 1985. Then I went to Augusta College and graduated there in 1990. And, I guess the thing is, I stayed in Augusta. A lot of people, especially, who like music, love music, they move away. They go to Athens, Georgia. They go to Atlanta, Georgia. I stayed in Augusta and did things here and really focused on downtown Augusta. And we'll talk more about that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've just been involved is because I've been here. I've stayed here. And a lot of people end up coming back. And then I work with them to get them, hooked up with the local music scene and doing that. But yeah, I guess it's just, being here has, made me who I am. And that's okay. I like being here.
Yeah, no, that's not a bad place. If you had to grow up somewhere, it's not a bad place to live your life. Just kind of continue to speak about you a little bit, like with you having this wide range of musical knowledge as you were growing up in Augusta. Like, what were you listening to? What was filling your ears as far as music that kind of formed your musical taste?
Well, it actually came way before here, and it was really, I think, the place that really changed my whole life as far as music was when we lived in Germany overseas. And this was in 1979, 80, 81. And I was in the 7th grade. So I was in middle school. And but the Hanau High School was 7th grade through 12th grade. So I was hanging out with the high schoolers also. I have an older brother. And that was the place when I guess, started going to high school parties and, through the school. And that's when I noticed the power of DJs because people were DJing these parties. These were other students older than myself. But I remember, and this was just noticed yesterday, it was in the news, that Michael Jackson's Off the Wall came out, in 1979 that summer. And I remember going to the party and hearing Off the Wall, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, first song on the record, and it blew my mind. And really, I kind of got into the whole DJ culture there, helping friends carry equipment in, watching them DJ. Then when we moved to Augusta, Evans High School parties, there was no music at all. They were just drinking and partying and trying to hook up. And I said, we need music. We need music. We need some music. Can I DJ a party? And, my mom had bought me some turntables, and some speakers and an amp because I wanted to DJ. And so I started DJing high school parties back in 84, 85 when I graduated. And it kind of continued from there, I still DJ and I love to play music. And I was also in a band and I, played drums with my older brother who played bass. And so we were doing the band thing, but in my back pocket, I could always DJ. I didn't need a band. I could just DJ and do the thing. And so that kind of carried me throughout my life. And I still love it and still do it. And but I love all things music related. Music and art for me is what gives me, gives a quality of life for the city or where you live. And I've always promoted that with what I do. And I was lucky to be able to after I was teaching, I taught high school Spanish for 4 years at Evans High School after I graduated. But in 1995, we saw a building in downtown Augusta, and we thought this would be a great place to open up a bar. And it would be a bar similar to what we've seen in Athens, Georgia, which always had a really amazing downtown music scene. Of course, you all
Yeah.
know how that is.
Yeah.
Atlanta, going to Columbia, South Carolina. And we were like, we should do this in Augusta, and if nobody's going to do it, we'll do it. Let's
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
So I took a chance with my younger brother, Jason, and we opened up the Soul Bar in downtown Augusta in honor of James Brown, who I thought, the Godfather of Souls from Augusta. We should call it the Soul Bar in honor of
Yeah.
him. Augusta should have a Soul Bar. I was surprised there wasn't already, and so
Yeah. I
that
know,
was
right?
our thing. We did that, and we cater to local music, especially original music. We weren't really looking for cover bands and stuff. We were trying
Yeah.
to support the local music scene that was happening in Augusta. Also, I would DJ Soul Bar, and it kind of created, the momentum for other businesses to then open in downtown Augusta. A good example is my friends Barry and Matt, who opened up Nacho Mamas a few doors down from the Soul Bar, and they did the food, but we had the drinks and the music. And it was really going on in downtown Augusta at the time. In fact, we got that building where the Soul Bar is now. We rented it from historic Augusta for $250 a month
Wow.
with an option to buy the building. And so we quickly bought the building for $45,000 and we took off. We owned that building, and that kind of made us, we didn't have to worry about a landlord and doing that. We kind of
Yeah.
controlled our
Yeah.
own destiny, and that's really why it worked for us, and why we were able to control our destiny and do things that we wanted to do in Augusta. And for me, at the Soul Bar, especially, was always focused on music, like I said, and also art. We did a lot of art shows in the building, and so it was more than just a bar. For me, it was like a cultural place where you could go and really enjoy music, enjoy art, and really kind of experience downtown Augusta and watch it kind of become what it is now and watch things
Yeah.
kind of grow in downtown Augusta. And for me, it never felt like work. It always felt like it was just a passion, for me to be able to do what I do. And I'm very grateful.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Like I said, to be able to see an idea, to have an idea, and to plan your work and work your plan, type of situation. And just, I want to back up and say something real quick because you said something that made no sense to me. How you going to try to hook up and drink and do nothing without music? Like what? Like that is I was going to say something else, but I'm going to hold that for another show. No, like it made absolute sense that when you came and I hit that to find the thing that's missing and put it in there. And once again, we'll talk about the downtown scene and how you've been able to help cultivate that over the years that you've been down there. But let's kind of talk about the history a little bit of what the Augusta music history is. And you already brought up his name. We've talked to the daughters of this man a little while ago, so I have no problem continuing the conversation about this. To you, what has the Godfather of Soul, James Brown, meant to your musical life? And then also, how do you think it fits in to the narrative about what Augusta's music history is?
Yeah, well, one thing about Mr. Brown, that I thought was really cool was that he could have lived anywhere in the world where he wanted to live. And he
Mm-hmm.
lived in Augusta, Georgia. He stayed home, basically. He lived in Beach Island, South Carolina, which is right across the river, like in North Augusta. And that's where he was. And I always thought, if Mr. Brown can live here and do his thing and travel and, but always come back home, I'm okay living in Augusta also. It's
Yeah.
relatively inexpensive to live here. You're close to a lot of places. And again, just being here for a while, I kind of felt like, why am I going to go somewhere and not know things and not know anybody, have connections when I'm here doing that? And I loved it when people would end up moving back home to Augusta, doing music, doing art, and I could work with them, and we could do things like that. And one thing I noticed too was back before the Soul Bar, when I was in college and when I was working as a teacher, was that a lot of musicians, local bands, they would rent spaces in downtown Augusta for cheap, and they would have their band space, and we would go down there and watch the bands rehearse. We just hung out, it was just kind of a thing because we loved music, and they would have their little parties in their places, things like that. And all that was great. But for me, it was like, we need a real place to do the music, And so before that, we had a all ages venue, called the Capri Cinema, in downtown Augusta. And we used to do all ages shows. There was no alcohol. But as we got older and we all turned 21 and we were getting of age, we said, we like going to bars. It's like, why don't we open up a bar here in Augusta where we can also do music? And that became, the whole thing with the Soul Bar was, now we have a place. Now we're all, of age. And now, the alcohol part was really for me was, you have to make your money to pay your
Yeah,
bills.
no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And so for me, that was cool. But I was never really into the bar business. My brother Jason took care of that. And what I took care of was, booking the musicians, doing the bands, having all the music and art stuff I kind of dictated and did. And really got a lot of folks who used to practice in those spaces years ago. Now they could come and play in a bar, in the Soul Bar,
Yeah.
and do the thing. And it was just really nice to kind of feel that energy in downtown Augusta. And like I said, little by little, more and more places started opening up. But, they always kind of gave us the props because we were the first ones to kind of
Yeah, that makes
to
sense.
do that, and
Yeah.
and so it always felt very natural. We weren't trying to force something and do something that wasn't happening. It was kind of like, just doing what felt natural, and it was, taking care of the bands and doing music and being involved with that whole thing. And it was just so nice to be able to do that and just kind of watch the fruits of our labor, 30 years later. Here we are, and downtown Augusta has a lot of things going on. And I've moved on. I've kind of retired from the bar business. I kind of knew it was time when my daughter's friends started going to the bars, and they're,
Yes, time to move on.
and then I'm hearing Mr. Coco, Mr.
No,
Rubio, and
no,
I'm like,
no,
oh, these are Maya's friends. It's like,
no.
man, I can't be hanging out doing this
It's fine.
anymore. So I
Find
kind
something
of
else to
made the
do.
move, and I got a job working at the Miller Theater, which was a really cool old historic theater in downtown Augusta that the symphony became owners of the theater, and they redid the theater, and they hired a company to run the theater, and I was on that team, and we did a lot of brought in a lot of bands, and that was so nice to see, having a historic venue completely revitalized, and doing things like that. And I worked there until COVID hit, and then they laid us off, and then
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't go back. I didn't go back to the Miller, and then I got a job at the Maxwell Theater at Augusta University, which is where I went to college. It used to be Augusta College back then. Now it's Augusta University, and it felt good to go back there and work in a venue like that, where we do a lot of things with the music department there on campus. We do so many different things with the students, and it's kind of given me a new energy, working with college students. But having a venue to me was always about having a good venue to do all these things. And so now I'm the patron services coordinator at the Maxwell Theater, and I, really lucky. I feel, lucky to be back in my alma mater working, and doing all the things that I've done in the past. It led me to the Maxwell, and it's
Yeah.
nice to be working there at my age. I'm 59 years old,
You
and
don't look it, sir.
hey, I feel good, right? No pun intended.
I
But
get you.
it keeps me young. Working with students, doing what I do with music and art in my community. I feel young. I can't believe I'm 59, but
Yeah.
let's go. Feeling good.
No, I feel you. I feel you on that. It's interesting to hear you talk about, like I said, you've been in the scene for 30 years and kind of like, and talking about, like, I want to get to where it is now, but kind of talk about where it was when you were kind of in the initial of doing this thing. What was the music scene like? What was downtown Augusta like in the initial, before you opened up the Soul Bar, and before you started to see all of these other changes happen?
Yeah, there wasn't too many, venues in downtown Augusta at the time. Again, like I said, a lot of local musicians were renting out spaces, to just have a rehearsal spot. One thing I did notice, though, was down at the lower end of Broad Street, we had, we had strip clubs, and those strip clubs were always busy.
Hmm.
So for me, a lot of times people would say, well, nobody, there's nothing going on downtown. Nobody really wants to go down there. Um, but I knew it's like, well, if there's something that they want to do, like
They'll
going to
go
strip
down there.
clubs,
Mm-hmm.
they will go down there. And
Mm-hmm.
so for us, it was like, so let's do something that will bring people down, And so when we did the Soul Bar, there was a couple other small bars around town that were doing music, but mainly the scene was cover bands. And, you had all the bars that had cover bands. They had bikini contests and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do was, just have a place where you could have original music with the local and support the local musicians and a local music scene. And before the Soul Bar, when I was in college, there was a little bar called Squeaky's Tip Top up on the hill near the university, the school. And I lived by the school, so I could walk to school, but I could also walk to Squeaky's Tip Top. And Squeaky's Tip Top was the place where all the local bands that were doing original music, kind of like, the alternative music scene,
Yeah.
they all played at Squeaky's Tip Top. And it was beautiful to go to a place like that, see the local musicians doing the thing, and just that's kind of what triggered me, I think, and got me interested in doing something like Squeaky's, but on a bigger level.
Yeah.
Squeaky's was this very small, space, and they just had beer, and but it was awesome. I had my first beer when I was legal, 21, at Squeaky's Tip Top. And when the things were going on downtown with all the practice spaces and the bands that would play Squeaky's would rehearse and practice downtown, I knew that if we did something downtown, it would just kind of naturally, it was kind of like the Squeaky's crowd would come
Would
downtown
find their way down. Yeah.
because they wanted to support that scene and the music like that. And so for us, it was like, it just felt natural. It wasn't like we were taking a chance because we were already kind of doing it. And it was
Yeah.
just like giving them a new venue. And so it was really cool to be able to do that. And then people were almost shocked that, man, all these people are coming downtown now. And it was like, well, yeah, because they want to hear music and they want to do stuff. They want to feel like downtown Augusta is a cool place to go. It's a historic downtown, a lot of cool buildings. It's just that, like a lot of places, when the malls opened up in the late
Mhm.
70s, early 80s, all the department stores in downtown Augusta went to the malls. So like overnight, downtown Augusta became a ghost town. And it was just like there was nothing down there. But for us, it was perfect. Like we could do whatever we want to in downtown
Yeah.
Augusta. And that's kind of what we did. And it just felt awesome to do what we wanted to do, but also really get the support of the community, not just the musicians and the artists, but other people were like, wow, downtown Augusta's got something going on. And, they gave a lot of credit to the Soul Bar, but there were other businesses after we opened, Nacho Mamas, and then Metro Coffee House, Pizza Joint, the Firehouse, all these little small businesses started opening up. And we were always friendly with each other. We worked together because we just wanted downtown to be a cool place where people would
Yeah.
come. And it really blew up, and it was just so nice to see downtown Augusta come back alive after being dormant for so many years.
It's fantastic. I love the heart behind it and how it brought out the artistic and the creatives in the community to open businesses and bring it back to its former glory, but maybe even better this time with your independent businesses.
Yeah, it's definitely good. Right now, we're going through a big downtown streetscape on Broad Street. So they're doing a lot of work on the sidewalks and the streets. They took down a lot of trees that they're going to bring back, but it's that's been they've been working on it for a year, and it's going to be another year before they're done. And that's kind of caused some panic with some folks because it has kind of kept people from coming down because well, there's not that much parking right now while they're doing
Yeah.
all this
Yeah.
work. But I think that when it's done, it's going to be better than ever, especially also with the completion of the new James Brown Arena. It used to be the James Brown Arena. Now I'm not sure if it's going to be. Right now they're calling it the new Augusta Arena because
Yeah. I
they're
think
trying
that's
to
what they're
get
saying now.
a sponsor
Yeah.
for a name, and that has people have mixed feelings about that. And I'm sure you talked to Deanna
Yeah.
Brown
Yeah.
about
No,
that.
it's like I said,
And
it is because, and I get that. I get that whole piece about it, but that is kind of the thing that I think you're seeing in places where music and revitalization is happening. You're seeing a bit of consternation in some avenues. I mean, we're seeing a tidbit of it here in Macon with a lot of the new businesses and lofts going up and buildings being built. yes, that does take access away from people for a little while, but if done correctly and protected correctly, the finished product is going to bring those people back and so many more with the way that it's set up. So I can understand making the adjustments and making the changes when it comes to that.
Yeah.
In that in that same thing, kind of talking about where the city is now and the community involvement, kind of talk about how the city and the community has started to realize that having a vibrant local music scene is important to the overall economic stability of the city.
Yeah, well, it's very obvious to me that having a vibrant music scene, adds a lot to the quality of life in our city.
That's right.
Yeah, to me, just the influence of James Brown, and like everybody was sampling Mr. Brown, and you can go with the main track, Funky Drummer, that so many people have sampled, and so I knew that he was, just a world class musician, has and had, a long career, but what he has done as far as like influencing hip hop culture and other things like that, it's like this is one of the most important people in music of all time. And he's from Augusta and he
Yeah, he's from
claims
here.
Augusta, and it was, natural for us to just honor him by calling it the Soul Bar in honor of James Brown. Augusta should have a soul bar. And his musicians, a lot of young musicians that were in his band, they started coming into the Soul Bar, and we had a lot of posters and things, memorabilia of Mr. Brown up in the bar, and they're like, "We need to get Mr. Brown down here so he can see what you're
What's being
doing."
done? Yeah,
Because really before that, he was always kind of, there was a negative light around him because of his, problems with the law and things like that. We were shocked when he walked in one night
mm.
and came in and saw everything. And then he went back to the pool table. He said, "Let me show y'all how to play pool." We're like, "Mr. Brown, do what you want to do." And he was awesome pool player. And everybody was just shocked that he was there. He was looking at all the stuff we had that had, his name and his face. And he said to me, he said, "Coco, you know what's up." Then he got his people, got in the Rolls Royce, parked outside the Soul Bar,
Yeah,
and took off.
pull it off.
And then, he would come back a couple times after that, and I would see him out, and we became friends. I mean, like he would invite us to go see him rehearse at the Imperial Theater, another historic theater in downtown Augusta. And so he just really appreciated, I think, that we saw all the positive of Mr. Brown, the influence on modern culture and pop culture and music. And I think, perception started changing, with him. And that's when hey, we should have a James Brown Boulevard here. We should
Yeah,
have his statue in downtown Augusta. We should, name the arena after Mr. Brown. And so things like that were really, really cool that I think we had a little part, I mean, he already did it. We just kind of were
no,
trying to shine the light on the greatness of Mr. Brown. And it was so cool to be able to do that. And I actually saw him the week before Christmas. They had a Comcast Connect Live little TV show, and he was on there, and I was on there for something, and he was not feeling well. He was really frail, and he had pneumonia, and seemed like he was always very energetic. When you
yeah,
see
yeah.
him, it
So,
was
so to
like,
see him
wow,
like that, yeah,
to see him like that, it was like, "Oh, Mr.
yeah,
Brown, I hope you feel better. Get some rest," And sure enough, he went to Atlanta a couple days later, and he passed away on Christmas Day. And that was it. It was kind of crazy that just like that, he was gone. And
yeah,
but I think when they had the funeral at the Civic Center, James Brown Arena, the people that came, to pay their respects included Michael Jackson,
yeah.
and
We're talking about that. Yeah,
and they called him to the stage, and he went up there, and paid his respects. And people realized that Mr. Brown's influence on, especially young Michael Jackson, when
yeah. At
the
that time,
Jackson
yeah,
Five,
yeah,
he was doing James Brown,
yeah,
dancing and things like that, And so it was really cool to see like the world pay their respects to the Godfather. And it's sad that he's gone, but I think what a man, what a legend, what a just a powerful cultural figure. And that I'm just glad that I was able to be his friend and to let him know how important he was to me, but
yeah,
also to a lot of people, especially in his hometown. And, I feel lucky, that I was able to experience that with Mr. Brown and the whole, Brown family. They always knew that I was on their side and,
yeah,
a big champion of their father. And,
yeah.
yeah, that, that makes me, proud that I could, at least do a little something to shine the light on,
Yeah, you
on
have
him.
that little piece. And it takes somebody outside of the family to
Hmm.
Mhm.
kind of champion things like this at times when it seems like there's respect had, but there isn't any like visual representation of that. And so to shine a light to go, yeah, let's have this thing for this man in this town because he's from here, he lives here, he stays here, he talks about us, he does all of those
Hmm.
things. So it's important to do that. With you being, I'm a former Air Force brat, so being military kids, I totally get it, and I think that gives us a different look at how we look at music and things. But you spent a lot of your time in the South, growing up with music from the South and different aspects and different genres of it. And I kind of try to tell people that when you think about music that comes from this area, it's different from everywhere else because we're different, and I have my own opinions on that. But when you think about music that comes out of Augusta, the Sharon Jones came out of Augusta, Lady A came out of Augusta, James Brown came out of Augusta. A lot of soul singers and opera singers and jazz and all that came from that town. Why do you feel like music that was created in the South is different from every other place, and why?
Oh yeah, I mean the South, who said it? Andre 3000. The South has something to say.
That part,
you know and yeah, I mean the South is so unique with far as just the history of music, and definitely soul music, I think, and R&B, big thing. But something that was for me, and I mean I'm just as passionate about, was especially going to Athens a lot and growing up, here in Augusta, but going to Athens in high school, hearing the band REM, and going to Athens and watching them play as they were coming up. And to me, it was like, wow, it completely changed my life, really. REM had a huge influence because to me, it was like, here we're talking about Southern rock, but it was a different kind of
it was a
Southern
different
rock.
kind. Yeah,
It's not the Leonard Skinner type of Southern rock. This was a more progressive, very bohemian style. That kind of changed my whole perception of what Southern music is.
mm,
And watching all those bands come out of Athens and Atlanta also, it was like there was a lot of, you know, I guess back then they'd call it new wave,
yeah,
or,
yeah,
just kind of like this became alternative music. But it was always like there's a really cool original Southern rock scene coming out of Athens, Georgia. And I fell in love with it. I loved how they were kind of doing their own thing. Indie rock, kind of college rock, supporting college radio, going on tours, playing small venues. But then as they got bigger and bigger, it was amazing to see how big REM became.
yeah,
But I remember them just like, really cool, normal guys that, to me, again, changed my perception of what Southern rock is. And I'm so happy that I was able to experience that because I'm a big fan of what you would call alternative rock, college rock. It's changed so much, with the internet now and all that.
yeah.
But I've always supported because those indie bands from Atlanta, from Athens, Columbia, whatever, we would bring them to Augusta, and we would have them give them a place to play here. Because a lot of times they're like, man, Augusta's so close, but there was never anywhere to
But there was
play.
never a place to
And
play.
so,
Yeah,
and so now they had a place and I supported them and they kind of were like, wow, this is like, we're in Athens, but we're in Augusta.
yeah,
And I really, really loved to be able to do both, like I love R&B. I love soul music. I love hip hop, but I also love live rock and roll. And to be able to, do all of that to me just keeps it fresh,
yeah,
and I still love all kinds of music like that. And you brought up Sharon Jones, and
yeah.
she was a group that we brought to Augusta, and they played the Soul Bar, the
That's
Dap
awesome.
Kings. It was like 10 of them on that little stage that we had, and that was because the guitar player for James Brown at the time, Keith Jenkins, um, really amazing white boy playing guitar for James Brown.
Ain't no wrong with that.
He was like, hey, I got this friends of mine, the Dap Kings. Can you get them in? And I was like, of course, yeah, let's do it. And we became good friends. And Miss Jones actually moved back to Augusta from New York City, and she bought a house in North Augusta. And when she was on tour, she'd be gone, then she'd come back home, and she
Come
was
on.
here. We would hang out. We became really good friends. She loved to go fishing, and it was so sad when she, got cancer
Yeah.
at her peak because she was blowing up
Yes,
and
she
she was about
was.
to just take it to another level,
Yes, she
and she
was.
got really sick. And and sadly she passed away. And that kind of stuff. It just I feel lucky that I get to I was able to know her and become her friend.
Yeah.
But for her to come back to Augusta too, I thought was cool. That she could live anywhere. She could have stayed in New
Yes.
York, do her
Very true.
thing, but she wanted to come back here because she grew up here, and she said she had good memories. Again, pretty cheap to live here, and she kind of loved the vibe of Augusta. So it was really cool to have her here. The short time that she moved back and stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of friends of mine who still play music here, they'll stay in Augusta, but really, if they really want to do more, you kind of have to maybe move to Atlanta,
But no,
maybe
you said,
even.
you spoke the piece, and I think that's what you're saying across the board with a lot of music cities. I know in Macon, we are experiencing that same thing, to where there are enough mechanisms within the city to where, yes, I can live here, and
Mhm,
have my career be somewhere else. But where you make your home base is an important thing. I think that's more important now than it used to
mhm,
be. To
mhm.
where, no, I don't just have to go to New York to do all these things. I don't have to live in Atlanta to do these things. The internet is a blessing and a curse at times. And it gives you the ability to put your stuff out everywhere. And if you market it the right way, you do the right things, you can get what you want
Yeah.
out of it. Well, Coco, normally there's one question that we ask everybody towards the end. And for you, I think we will get the answer that we need from the quote mayor of downtown Augusta. If somebody had 72 hours to spend in Augusta, where would you send them venue wise to hear music?
I would definitely tell them to come downtown, and check out different things there. We have, small venues. We have a really cool record store called Gransky Records in downtown Augusta, and they've started having live shows there. And it's really cool because it's all ages. And so it's like my friends and they can bring their kids to the show,
Yeah.
and it's really cool to see that. There's also a really cool bar a couple doors down called Firehouse, and so you can get your drink over there and then come back and check out the bands. And there's been some really cool shows. It's funny too because the owner, he's really into heavy rock. He
Okay.
likes heavy rock, and he brings these heavy bands, a lot of punk bands, a lot of metal bands, and it packs out. These kids love it. And to see that live is really cool for me because it's like these are the young people who before had to go out of town maybe to go see these kind of
Hmm.
bands. They can do it now in downtown Augusta, and it's just a beautiful scene happening at Gransky Records. All the other bars that have music, a lot of them still do cover bands. That's fine. I mean, that's, whatever they
Please,
want to
sir.
do. People come out to do it. I don't hate on anything. We have places like Stillwater Tap Room, which is next to Nacho Mama's, same owners, and they do a lot of bluegrass kind of stuff, more acoustic kind of music. Really cool. Then you have some venues like bigger venues like the Imperial Theater, which is an old theater that never closed. It's always been there. It's about 800 capacity. And they bring a lot of music and things like that. Some bands that are traveling through, you would see shows there. The Miller Theater, which I mentioned earlier, is the home of the symphony. So you get a lot of symphony shows, which is great. It brings a lot of folks out for the classics, and it's amazing to see that. The other thing is like they also bring, regular bands through, and it's really cool to see those bands coming through the Miller. You have the Bell Auditorium, which is right next, it's right part of the James Brown Arena complex. You have the Bell and the James Brown Arena, and they have big acts. They've renovated that space and have brought in many, many, big shows. Black Crows was a recent one that played there, and it was really nice. Atlanta band that I remember seeing the Black Crows when they were Mr. Crow's Garden
Huh.
back in the '90s, and it was cool to see them, kind of blow up. Also,
Yeah.
to me, they were more like when they were Mr. Crow's Garden, they were trying to be like REM, kind of like bohemian
Mm-hmm.
rock. But then they kind of said, no, we're going to become like the Rolling Stones, more like blues rock, and they became, the Black Crows.
Yeah, family. Yeah.
Um,
No, it sounds great for everything that you're doing to help cultivate the scene from the beginnings with the Soul Bar and you kind of laying the foundations of it. And now being kind of emeritus when it comes to a lot of this stuff and a go-to guy with all this. Coco, thank you so much for taking the time for being with us today. We greatly appreciate you.
Yeah,
oh
it's
yeah,
fun.
my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. That is the conclusion of
Mhm.
our show today. We want to thank Coco Rubio for joining us. A lot of great stories coming from that man and knowing that he's had a big part to do with the cultivation of what the downtown scene looks like now. Susan.
I mean, it takes people like that that are dedicated but see the vision And I love the fact he kept talking about how, he saw the reason to stay there. And
Uh-huh.
he talked about why James Brown saw the reason to stay there, why Sharon Jones saw the reason to come back.
Uh-huh.
Augusta is just an amazing place, and it's fabulous to learn what is behind these stories.
Yeah, it's the why behind a lot of this stuff that
Mm.
that makes these stories great. And they have a ton of stuff going on with the Bell Auditorium and all the stuff they're doing with the arena, the expansions that they're having, and just showing that the community is embracing not only its music history, but its music future as well. And that's what you love to see in places like
That's
this.
right.
So we want to thank Destination Augusta once again for having us have this conversation. And we'll have more conversations just like this with a bunch of other cities in and around the South. So just stay tuned to streamthecreek.com. Follow, subscribe, like, do all the things. But
All the
until next time, Charles Davis over here, Susie Cowan over there. We'll see y'all next time.